Are we ready? All right.
Okay. Reconvening Jitoc, and now we'd like to hear from Judiciary, please.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having us. I'm Marcia Shells. I'm the Chief Technology Innovation Officer. Sometimes I'm referred to as the Chief Information Officer, but the Judiciary gave me a fancy title. And this is Joe Paquin. He's my Director of Infrastructure and IT Support Services. So I'll be giving you an overview about the judiciary and the IT that we support there. And then Joe is going to give us the latest status on our IT modernization program, the largest component of that being the network replacement that you heard about earlier. And he's also going to tell you about all of the various cybersecurity protections that we've been putting in place. And if you have questions about the flood, he would also be the person to ask. I didn't include that in this document, but he can talk about how the judiciary fared there. So a little bit about myself. I've been the Chief Technology Innovation Officer at the judiciary now for just over 2 years. Time flies. It's unbelievable. Before that, I was with the ADS, actually, supporting the Agency of Human Services for a little over 3 years. And that coincided with my moving to Vermont, which is my favorite state. Before that, I was in Connecticut for 25 years, working in IT leadership at Yale University. And before that, I was served as an officer in the United States Air Force. I have a bachelor's in computer engineering, an MBA, and a master's in business analytics and project management. So a little bit about the judiciary, and welcome to the new committee members. So the judiciary in Vermont is a unified court system, meaning it all reports up to the Supreme Court. In some respects, this simplifies things. I know various states have very complicated court systems. But here we have our appellate court, which is the Supreme Court, which has the building right next door. And we have 14 units in the Superior Court, one for each county. The Superior Court has 5 divisions: civil, criminal, family, probate, and environmental. And environmental, actually, as well as the Judicial Bureau, are statewide divisions. The state court administrator, who I report to, has 4 chiefs. And she reports herself to the Supreme Court. The 4 chiefs are the finance, planning and court services, myself, information technology, and then trial court operations. And we work very collaboratively, that's a hard word, as a leadership team. I'm really proud to be part of this team. It's really functioning well, and I really have a voice at the table, which I think is really important when it comes to technology. I'm a strategic partner. So I gave a little bit of the description here about what my role entails, vision and leadership for developing the technology for the judiciary, which has a workforce of approximately 400 people, including judges. We have around 60 judges. As I mentioned, I'm part of the senior management team. And I reorganized the IT team into what we call the Technology Services Center, or TSC, which has I have a staff of 25, including myself. If you look on the next page, you see an overview of our org chart. I have 2 directors. Joe is one of them. Joe oversees, as I mentioned, infrastructure and now networking, as we were putting in the judiciary network, as well as the technology support help desk. I have another director focused on our applications and our data. And she oversees a team of developers who are doing things like data exchanges with the FBI or agencies and services or Department of Motor Vehicles. We have a lot of data exchanges with other agencies. And we have a reporting team. She also has, and I think this is really key to some of our success, she also has another team that supports the application. So it's like a secondary help desk. So we have a help desk focused on desktop support, technology, and another help desk focused on using the applications. And they actually came from the courts. So they're led by someone who had been a court operations manager. So there's a lot of expertise, and they're also technically savvy. And we've integrated these two help desks with technology so that they seamlessly can route the right ticket. And I'm proud to say we've increased customer satisfaction, I would say 100%. And we actually answer the phone. And that's going to be important when I get into our budget, because I'm afraid we're going to have some limitations post-pandemic era on staffing. But we'll get to that in a bit. So our major applications, of course, we have a case management system. That's the big gorilla. And that is, we purchased off the shelf from Tyler Technologies. It took them and I started right after they finished that implementation, but it took about 4 years to put that in. And I have to say that not much else happened in IT during those 4 years. So we've been having in the last 2 years, we've been really looking across the board and correcting things, upgrading things. There's been a lot of activity. In fact, there's nothing that we have not touched in the last 2 years. Tyler has now rebranded this to Enterprise Justice, and they are a difficult partner. They also provide our e-filing system and our public portal. A public portal, I put a little blurb here. That's what offers the public or attorneys or state attorneys or public defenders access to all the court records. You can see what you see based on your permissions. So we have 18,000 plus people using that public portal. And then Odyssey itself, or Enterprise Justice, is used only by the judiciary. And so that's about 400 users. Both systems are not secure. And Tyler has admitted this. And Tyler has now asked all customers to upgrade to the latest version, which is 2023, by the end of December. Luckily, we already had started that. And so we are in the midst of doing this upgrade. We don't know exactly how long it's going to take. It will not disclose what the vulnerability is. I know it's a bit shocking. And the states have gotten together and even engaged.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask us to consider if we should continue in open session.
I guess the question before we do.
I'm not going to disclose any.
Yeah, may be is the information that you're providing us largely available publicly.
Yes, it is.
Already.
Yes, Senator.
Country.
Yes.
And so that you're not intending to touch on anything that is not already in the public domain in your discussion?
Correct. Yes. So we are quickly moving to upgrade the system along with the other states who utilize this. And actually, this system is in 75% of the judicial systems in the United States. So it's a significant push. Yes. Following that, we will also be upgrading the public portal to their new products, and I'll describe that in a moment as well. So just to keep things as secure as possible, we have to continually upgrade these Tyler systems. When I started, the digital evidence in the courthouses was still because we're rolling this out now, was on thumb drives. Someone would bring a thumb drive into a courtroom and have to plug it into a laptop and share that laptop. Of course, we couldn't have the laptop on the network for security reasons. And in this day and age of video and photography everywhere, you know how important digital evidence is in a courtroom. So we've implemented a digital evidence management system, which is housed in the cloud. And this will also make it seamless in order to get evidence to the Supreme Court. That was a real problem when it was a physical device. So that's a huge step forward. We've also upgraded our jury management system, and we actually now have kiosks in the courthouses so that someone can check in with their, I forget what they use.
The juror summons card.
Jury summons card, thank you. Rather than having to have an individual standing at the door to check them in, and that has been a big gain in productivity or efficiency, I should say. We did implement a business intelligence system that we wrote in-house with our development staff using Microsoft SQL Server and Power BI. And this is providing high-level executive dashboards to be able to monitor the efficiency and the operations of the courts. And then, as I'm sure you're aware, during the COVID pandemic, it became necessary to implement video conferencing in a large way. And so the system that was implemented is Cisco, and we have that in, as I all courthouses, and we're implementing more technology into the correctional facilities as well. So the judiciary maintains the equipment and the network to that equipment, or will have the network to that equipment in the 6 correctional facilities. I wish I had a picture to show you, because the existing equipment, the screen was about this big with a telephone receiver, and our new monitors are like the size of this, and they're hardened, and it's going to make a big difference to be able to have court sessions held remotely from the correctional facilities.
May I
All
ask
right,
a
now,
question on that?
oh, yes.
Representative Chase. So I have thank you. So I have a friend who's also one of the state's most renowned journalists, who is advocating for me, and as well as other senators and representatives, to look at not mandating, but really strongly encouraging all of our court proceedings to be available via Zooms for them to have access to them. I understand that was the case during the pandemic, but it's not currently required. And I'm wondering, are you at all opposed, or do you have any comments that you might suggest have considered, or about opening up the courts so that all of the proceedings are in fact recorded or put on YouTube? Any thoughts you have on that would be helpful for me, just to weigh in the balance the comments I'm hearing from other advocates in this area.
So thank you, Joe Paquin, Senator. It's one of the things that is out of our purview with whether that will happen. We can provide it technically, but it's up to the Chief Superior Judge to provide that guidance. So I would definitely get with Judge Tomasone.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to talk to you about the budget that funds the IT for the judiciary. This is interesting. It's split. All of the staff, the 25 staff, are funded from the general fund. And then there is a special fund called the Tech Fund that was established in 2007. And I put in here the wording of what it was established for. It's a portion of certain fines. There's an administrative surcharge for civil violations, a failure to answer pay, and a failure to pay fee. So this has been a problem in the last numerous years, but it has not surfaced as an emergency, I would say, until now. And I would like to explain that a bit. If you turn to the next page, you'll see that the tech fund, this revenue coming in, has about been cut in half. It looks like it was a high of 1.6 million, and now we're estimating for the current year it will only be 800,000. And this comes at a time when we have systems that we are purchasing and have subscriptions to, versus in 2007, they had a homegrown system to run the courts. They did not have a digital evidence system. They did not have a WebEx system. They had limited e-filing. So the way that the judiciary has managed up to date is through, first of all, the special fund holds its money from year to year. And so any savings that the judiciary had on carryover, for instance, wherever possible, they would add to the tech fund. And then there was the big project that took 4 years to put in the new case management system. And during that time period, they were really only focused, as I mentioned, on that case management system, and everything else sort of fell by the wayside. So the items that the tech fund does pay for, I've listed here, like infrastructure and all our hardware, all our software, all our cybersecurity, any services we utilize. we've done an extensive analysis of what we expect to spend in FY25, and it's 2.8 million on those items. So you can see there's a gap between 2.8 million and 800,000. So we're going to be making the request this year to the legislature to give us $2 million in base funding to maintain solvency for this fund. Yes.
Just a question in terms of you're making a request. How is the request going to be made? Is it made to a particular committee or to the committee that deals with judicial management or to the committee of jurisdiction regarding the judiciary?
I believe, based on how things went last year, it goes to the appropriations committee or committees. And we had presented this last year as well to the Ways and Means Committee to see about increasing the fees or fines, but that did not occur.
So it's not going to the judiciary committees, though?
They will, I'm sure they will weigh in, but no, yeah. For instance, they did support us when we made the request last year for the network. In addition to that $2 million, we are going to be asking for 5 permanent positions. 4 right now are limited service. There are 2 who are on that application support help desk that I mentioned, and 2 that are on the desktop support help desk. So these are, I would say more junior positions, but if we outsource them, it costs double. And that was the case when I started. We actually had our help desk being contracted out, and to save money, we hired 2 internal help desk staff, and it's been fantastic because we're answering the phone and they get to know the judiciary, they feel part of the judiciary. So it really would be a shame to lose them. And then lastly, we have a database administrator who works for us on demand also as a contractor. And we anticipate that we could hire someone to be a full-time DBA for the amount of money that we are spending on just getting a half-time DBA through contracting. So Kevin already discussed how we're coordinating, and thank you, Senator, because I know you had a lot to do with that, with getting us all together, and I appreciate that. We're really, it's a great collaboration we have between the 3 branches. And we do communicate regularly, not just at those meetings. And so I've really enjoyed that change. Our case management system I mentioned, we are in the process of upgrading. As I mentioned, the support for this officially ends at the end of this calendar year. We have received a commitment from the vendor that they will continue to support us, even if we go past that, as long as we are engaging in good faith in this upgrade. There is a product, a Microsoft product called Silverlight that is embedded within this application that will be eliminated in this version. However, there's more than that prompting this urgency. Post that upgrade, we're going to be migrating then the public portal, as I mentioned, to Tyler's newest 2 products that are, one is for looking up case information called Research, and the other one is for making online payments, Defendant Access, it's called. So that is another key reason why I need those 2 positions on that application support team, because they are in charge of those accounts and the support for those 18,000 people using these systems. And we're also going to be migrating then Enterprise Justice to the cloud, and that will be our last on-premises system to move. So the anticipated date where we're going to be out of Tech Vault completely will be spring of 2025. And that will eliminate a significant cost down the road of replacing the Dell VX Rail infrastructure. So we've been slowly moving everything off, such as jury, as evidence management, even our help desk software is moving. So we will be completely, and our business intelligence will be completely in the cloud by spring of 2025.
All right.
All right, I'll turn it over to Joe.
The modernization project that the legislature funded last year. The purpose of the project was to increase the speed in the judiciary, security, and reliability. We have a very small subset of applications, and to be able to secure our environment with that small subset was really a significant improvement, and increasing the reliability with redundant circuits across our enterprise. Those redundant circuits, we'd have a wide area network, or what's called an ELAN circuit. It's a private fiber network that goes back to our data center, broadband cable in each of our courthouses, and then a failover of AT&T 5G on the GovNet. So in any situation where we could lose two of those lines and still be able to hold court hearings, which is a pretty significant improvement to today. We lose one line and the courts are down, and access to justice is not served. So we're providing public and private Wi-Fi with this, which we do not have today. We have public Wi-Fi that's on DSL, which we all know is not great, but we're going to be providing private Wi-Fi that will increase the efficiency of our staff and allow our judges to move about the courthouses without losing their connections to our case management system. We are on budget, on time, and within scope of this project. One of the major risks that we had identified was procurement of hardware, and the estimated delivery time of being August of 2024. We actually have acquired all of our hardware, and we are configuring and getting ready for deployment next month. The goal is that our courthouses will be on our new network by the middle of February. Every single courthouse. So that will be a significant improvement to the speed of how we can do stuff. Rewiring of courthouses. We have several vendors engaged in rewiring our courthouses. Currently, they are all Cat 3 or Cat 5 cable. It is going to Category 6 cable, and increasing the amount of connections in courtrooms, for example, where we've deployed significant hardware and we have significant cabling issues. So that should improve the courtroom experience. We have sound system replacements that is ongoing as well. We actually are going next Friday to our test site with those. Currently, the ability to control the sound systems and what noise is sent to WebEx or into the public PA is very difficult. This is a new touchscreen system that we've designed, and they'll be able to do one button to be able to do what they need to do. Support staff can focus on taking care of justice. Our public access terminals will also be replaced during our transition with new touchscreen tablets that will allow for faster connections and managed remotely. And then our Jury Plus kiosks will also be added to our network and be able to be managed remotely. Some of the cybersecurity protections, Representative Sibilia, I know that the Tyler Odyssey thing was a shock for you. Some of the things that we did is that I put the public portal and our public facing resources behind a web application firewall called Akamai to help protect us when we learned that there was security issues with the application. So we're able to monitor and block anybody from outside of this country from accessing our resources and be able to see if people are accessing the application in a way that they're not intended to. So we are alerted to that. So we've done significant improvements, but we are waiting for the upgrade to be able to be more confident in that.
I might just,
go ahead. Sorry about that.
my shock
Yes.
is I was aware when the system was being implemented that there were security concerns. I think prior to both of you being there. So I'm shocked that we've landed here today without that being resolved. And I'm also just shocked to hear those kind of statements made in an open session.
Fair. So some of the other protections that we have started implementing because of our new network, we have a 24/7 security operations center as a service, Arctic Wolf. It is much cheaper for us to outsource that, to have somebody watch our network 24/7 and take care of issues. So that is in the implementation phase. We're turning up their monitoring system now. We have zero trust network access across our network with ClearPass. If you don't have a certificate, you don't get access to resources, and the resources that you do have access to must be explicitly defined. So that anybody that plugs in, hey, here's the internet. That's all you're going to get, which is really nice. We do have threat detection on our network with Wildfire by Palo Alto. This constantly monitors all the traffic and looks for specific actions and alerts us and blocks traffic. We have endpoint protection with Cortex XDR, so that monitors each individual computer and server that we have. We have endpoint management with Intune that's in configuration. Response and mitigation. So we are working with Palo Alto Networks Unit 42 to have a retainer with them. In case something happens, we will be able to respond fast. And that's the biggest thing, to how fast you can respond. Firewalling, our internal and external firewalls are almost fully in production and ready to go. Again, zero trust methodology. Everything must be explicitly defined in order for that to be let through the firewall. We do have infrastructure monitoring up and running, so PRTG and uptime.com to let us know if stuff is down, if our public facing resources are down. We are doing security penetration testing ongoing. Anytime we do significant changes to our infrastructure or add a new application, we are doing penetration testing and go ahead.
Who is doing the testing?
We do different vendors to try to eliminate.
Yeah, I don't need the specifics.
Yeah.
Is it you or it's?
Yeah, they're vendors external, and we use a different vendor each time to eliminate, maybe somebody will find something else. So that's a big deal for us. We do have air gap protection in our system with a Rubrik appliance that has an encrypted version of all of our data. So if our environment is compromised, our data is safe and we can restore our environments and bring the courts back up in a quicker manner. And then we are retiring several old servers and several legacy systems as we speak. So a lot of initiatives happening, but this is going to get us to a point where we feel very confident.
Another question. So remind me, does the legislature's IT consultant consult with you, talk with you, Lisa?
Yes.
Can we hear from Lisa briefly about that level of engagement? And
Today?
Yes. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
For the record, my name is Lisa Dobbin. I'm the JFO IT consultant. I've consulted with them a few times over the summer and received a written report to them from them earlier this week in prep for reviews and intermediary reviews. Things are going great. I mean, based on the schedule that they've shared with me and the accomplishments that they've shared, and they seem to be on track. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To what extent is there any internal, independent auditing done of judiciary systems?
So there was an independent review done for the network replacement project, and that was also shared with Lisa. And when they implemented the next generation CMS Odyssey system, there was also an independent review. We've also done security audits. We just did one with the National Center for State Courts. And actually many of these items that Joe just described were as a result of findings from them. And we have just budgeted for that every two years. Every 2 years, we're going to repeat that, full audit for cybersecurity.
Now, are these audits or are these independent reviews? An audit is something that has to be done under government audit, generally accepted government auditing standards.
You're right. I would call it an assessment on the cybersecurity, and the independent review was an independent review, not an audit.
I would just suggest that maybe something offline that you might want to think about.
Okay.
Because in terms of just doing something that is acceptable, independence means that's why the government auditing standards do that, and that includes the performance auditing associated with information technology systems.
All right. Thank you, Senator.
Question?
Oh, sorry.
The promise of technology way back when was that it would make people more efficient, but it also might displace some jobs. Has the history of the Vermont judiciary ever seen jobs eliminated, or do we just continue to see staff added as we add these extra services and protections, which are well needed?
I don't believe there have been reductions.
No, and with the current state of the increase in crime in the state, the amount of hearings and staff required has just increased because there's more workload for the judiciary to handle.
I will tell you, though, that during the pandemic, there was a large number of limited service positions that the judiciary was awarded to use to get through the pandemic. And a number of them were called operations assistants. And they were actually fell under planning and court services, and they were used to help run the Cisco WebEx. And they are being phased out. They will be eliminated by June 30th. 2024. And they have trained now the judicial assistants in the courts to do that role. So that is a case where there was a blip and it has come back down.
Any further questions before we move on to the next agenda item? Again, thank you very much to the judiciary as always.
Thank you. Yes.
What's here?
Just so we're close enough to try to take.
Just in case,
Just in
right?
case. Just in case.
Just in case.
Folks, the next presentation is online. I'm going to share it on the screen, but if anyone wants a printout, I did print a few.
Thank you.
As far as scheduling awareness, I'm gonna try to see if we can get Tim pushed back a little bit, to give ADS a little bit more time.
Want to try that, so prepared.
I'm hoping to give you until noon. I just need to check with Tim and make sure that works for him too.
I can't email Tim Ash and share your screen at the same time, so I'm just going to email to him.
Hi. Well, I guess I'll start for the record. Denise Riley Hughes. I'm the Secretary for Digital Services and the State CIO. And so what I'll do is, I think, is as he's emailing that, I'll introduce myself because you don't need to see a splash screen of my picture while you get to look at me. I joined the state as deputy in January. And I spent a little bit of time as interim through the floods. And then I was appointed just over a month ago to the secretary's spot in CIO. Although I have not spent my career in state government, I have spent much of my career supporting state government. So being able to apply that lens at what has worked across government versus what does the technology industry do and how they operate and how do we benefit Vermont in that capacity to maximize what the investments that we are making in technology and the modernization that we're driving to drive better outcomes is the lens that I try to look through with the things that we're doing in ADS. We're good to go? Awesome. So I like interactive sessions and I appreciate Repsilia's questions that you've asked in prior conversations and speakers, and I would like to answer your questions as we go along. And I will hope to be able to know the answer, if not, come back to it. So I do want to go over flood impact because stepping on week 2, day 5 as an interim, I had the opportunity to see my entire neighborhood start flooding in southern Vermont, and we looked at what was going on and what was potentially happening at a state level. And so with ADS, one of the primary things that we did out of the gate on day 1, thanks to our CTO, our networking team, and really all of the staff within ADS, is predict the needs of the agencies, the departments, and Vermonters when it came to flood response. And so what we did was we took a very active role in the SEOC. We maintained the same resource in the SEOC the whole time so that we knew what was happening and what the needs were so that we could operate on it and act on it quickly. In doing so, what it did was it did slow down some of the projects that we had online, but what we did was provide an opportunity for seamless single experience to the 5,000 Vermonters that were impacted by the floods and the almost over 600 businesses that were impacted. So we worked really close with the Vermont Department of Labor. We worked close with ACCD, public safety,
the governor's office, AOA. So we really took a very active, let's call it a behind the scenes role to make sure that the 211 data that was coming in was managed in a central repository so that we maintain data privacy of our Vermonters. The MOU agreements with FEMA were also done in a way that we could maintain data integrity and controlled access of that information to not risk breach. And so that did actually take quite a bit of time. I don't think summer existed for ADS and our staff, but I think that we're on a good roll to get back to regular business operations. And so due to that, and also due to critical infrastructure being one of those areas that was impacted and also in great demand during the flood, our critical infrastructure cyber committee or council has not fully built the membership up. And so we're hoping, and the anticipation is that we start the first meeting in December. But that did, in reality, slow the growth and slow the progress of that. But I think that we can make up for that time given lessons learned and some of the things that are happening in that space right now. I'm going to talk about the future of ADS first, and then we can get into the website outages if that's okay. So I had an opportunity coming in as deputy to look at ADS as an organization, what we were doing well, and what are the things that we needed to look at improving. And what I did was look operationally at the first 6 years of the agency was really startup mode. We were trying to get a hold of and a handle on everything that we had obligations to do around transparency, financial transparency, technology, supportability of the agencies. And so if we look at where the next 5 years are, it's really going to be in that operational maturity space. So that's what we're focusing on now, is driving a more streamlined, positive user experience, looking at standards across the board so that we can establish what those base core enterprise standards are for state government. And the piece that I am looking at in many different areas beyond just ADS 2 is reducing the complexities and simplifying what we do a little bit more. And a lot of that has to do with burning down our technical debt. So we do a pretty good job of identifying where an asset was procured, where the financial impact and financial cost is at a project layer. But when we look at the overall operations, did we and can we manage to the reduction of that legacy environment and the improved operations of that new modern environment? And this also speaks to the usability of the business agencies as well. And ultimately, if it's a public-facing service, what that would be. We also are driving towards making the spend, the use and the access of technology a lot more predictable, both for state government users and for Vermonters.
Yeah. I tried to look through the slides to make sure you're not going to answer this question that I'm asking. Could you explain a little bit how the budgeting works for ADS, knowing that you're speaking to the complexity piece that you were just mentioning, that it's like you're touching all of the agencies, but can you talk through how you don't have a central budget for ADS, right? Like, so how does, can you talk about how the budget is split between and how that kind of operates?
This is why I'm a technologist and not a CFO.
That's okay.
But at a high level, you heard the overview on the IT modernization fund that just started, and all of that is driven towards projects that are, I would call them partner agency projects. We have allocation and we have SLA, and then we have a couple other little pockets that are doing other things, but for the most part, it's allocation and SLA. And I would say 90% of our budget is in the SLA space. So that goes to that predictability piece that I was talking about. That is a chargeback model to the agencies. And as far as that managed control, that is an area that we're looking to improve upon.
Oh, sorry. So as far as the chargebacks and things like that, like I'm just as a newbie coming in and like seeing this spread across things, would it make your life, everyone's lives easier and more transparent to have one budget where things are like being pulled from?
I think centralizing some of the budgets is going to be important. I think that we've done that with our organization, and given that's early stages of that fund, we have a lot of opportunity to look at the progress of that. But when you're asking me about that operational maturity model that we're driving to, being able to have a baseline expectation of services and the cost of those services is absolutely important to Vermont and to our budget sustainability as well. So the website outages, would it be okay for the chair to, or the co-chair to pose a question that I can answer? Because I can talk in general, but I really want to make sure it's relevant to answer your questions.
Any immediately? Okay, the first one that comes to my mind is we had a couple of outages that were virtually identical. And after the first one, our vendor had assured us that they had resolved those. And it sounds like perhaps this time around they're suggesting some of the same changes that it sounded like they had already made. So speak to a little bit about how we're going to make sure that the web services stay up.
So actually both of them were the result of the same situation, which I'm making a prediction when I say this, but it was a construction project that was located specifically in close range to the data center, which is probably why it was limited to that one data center and not a global widespread East Coast outage. We were not the only state impacted. So what we talked about was why didn't the failover work? So what we did in the first one was we tested some of the failover and we identified areas that needed to be improved both on their side and things that we could do to automate our process a little bit. And so when the second one happened, their failover plans internally had failed. So it proved that the test that we'd worked on was missing some pieces. So what we did as a follow-up was got a guarantee commitment from them that they are actually building a higher availability cloud hosted model that will remove what the current infrastructure is. And that's gonna support about 80% of our website hosted environment. 20% we're working on a more longer term plan. So what that list of the 20% is, they were gathering that in our last meeting. But the commitment is really opening that communication. We need to be part of the project plan. They can't just make moves without notifying us. And if there's going to be a plan change, we need to do that. And if it's going to be an unplanned change, it needs to fail over into this highly available environment. And so I think that to date, you've done 3 separate failovers now, and there has been success in each one of them. And so they do have a new, let's call it a third-party cloud hosted environment that didn't exist in either of the 2 outages.
And with those 2 incidents that did occur, it was a single fiber cut?
It was similar to what we experienced during the flood in some of the areas. It was a dig that was happening that multiple providers are connected into. And all of those providers were pulled down, but it was close to their locale. And so that's why it was minimized to their data center.
Yeah, it was a public conduit.
Yeah.
So that a lot of different fiber carriers use.
Mark Combs, my CTO.
Oh, sorry, for the record, I'm Mark Combs, I'm the Chief Technology Officer.
Thank you. Has the vendor implemented any additional redundant paths that are more diversified since?
Yes. We can
That goes out
probably
the other
share
side of
even
the
more
road.
details, yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other
So
questions?
we did advise them that we do not have the room within the state to have another outage of this, and they have provided some commitments and assurities with their current model and the weekly sessions that we're going through, that is not going to happen. So that is what I'm holding them to.
Okay. What recourse do we have if they fail to?
In the current contract, we do have outage compensation built in. we are looking at with our agency attorney general, whether or not that actually is going to be safe.
Okay.
Now that question has just gone from my head. Yes, it's back. So can you talk a little bit about what you all are learning in terms of communication and those types of events within and across state government? Talk a little bit about how that happens, who you're communicating with.
So that is actually an area as we talk about standards that we're looking to grow and improve upon. So right now it is reaching out to our partners in state government, the agency leadership. There are a couple of different, what's called a email distribution list that we are sending those notifications out to. We are looking to improve that and make it more of a more highly available alert system.
And specifically, I'm also thinking about the other two branches of government. Are they?
Their systems are not hosted through our service. So as I think as you had seen Kevin present, that's hosted internally within legislature. But as far as that notification, they're on those distribution lists.
So there's not a specific to make sure the other branches of government.
The other CIOs and technology leaders are on those distribution lists.
Okay.
They are receiving them. So the expectation is in the current form of communication is that they're dispersing that through their business users, their agency users.
Okay.
So if I can get more specific, Kevin and his team will receive an email.
Yes.
Kevin and his team will notify their user community.
And Marcia and her team
And this
as
is
well.
Marcia and her team, yes.
And I heard you say will, which sounds
Oh, I do.
like in the future.
No, do.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. The will piece is, we want to do more.
Great. Love that.
Okay.
I have another question on this slide, Mr. Chair, but I'm not sure if we're still on this topic.
I had no further updates on that topic.
Please.
The Cybersecurity Council.
Yes.
So I worked with the previous CIO to introduce that legislation and get it passed last year. Much to my chagrin, I believe the legislature was actually removed from that Cybersecurity Council. The administration had proposed that, and which was a relief to me. And I believe my colleagues and I removed ourselves from that. So can you talk a little bit about what the notification processes are for cyber breaches, specifically with the legislature? And I'm thinking, at what point do the speaker and pro tem specifically get notified and by whom?
Okay. I like that question. I don't think that the Cyber Council would be the one to drive that effort. I think that that's efforts is in the process of being developed and executed with the joint meetings that we host between legislature, judiciary with Kevin, Marcia, and myself. And we bring our teams in. My security office is attending Kevin's, Marcia's. So we are very tight on that. So the desire to get to that point quickly is on the top of our list. The Cyber Critical Infrastructure Council is more going to reach outward, out of state government. And so I wouldn't want that need to be held up by recommendations coming from a committee or council.
Okay. Are you aware of right now how and when the Speaker of the House, for instance, would be notified of a cyber breach
I'm
in
not
state
aware.
government? Okay, that feels like not the right answer. So, and is a priority for me and has been for probably 3 years.
What I have
So-
found in the emergency management response efforts is it becomes very much a direct communication, and we found this with the flood was the same way. And so it's this, in a cyber breach, it really depends on what the breach is. We train for these things, and I think that going and reviewing our cyber policies to see where in that breach model that you would be notified, but I think that there could be a component missing to that, which is where the expectation, when do you want to know and what breach type do you want to know? So not something that we'll obviously solve in this conversation, but it absolutely, like, I appreciate the question. It's relevant. There are some breaches that you won't find out about until after, but as far as like mass breaches that create public risk are ones that along those lines should be included.
And I would just note, so first of all, you're probably noticing this is an area of high interest to me. But those conversations about what we would know not after it was over.
Right.
I believe the legislature should actually be involved in determining that, as well as the judiciary, the type of. And so I'm really acutely interested in making sure. I think these are some of the most pressing issues that we're facing right now, cyber and adapting to climate change, and making sure that we have good connections across state government and notifications. And it's a weakness that I had noted years ago, and I don't think that it's been rectified. And, you know, I will also be speaking with legislative leadership about their need to really get on this. This is the type of thing that if we get caught unaware, could be really catastrophic. So, thank you. All set.
Thank you.
Please.
So AI was an area of interest for the committee as well. We have made some strong inroads in that space, and to Representative Scalia's comments, AI is a very difficult conversation to have without cybersecurity right next door and without data privacy right next door. So with the AI space, though, the council has made some great progress. They have adopted their code of ethics, which is what was presented when the council was created. They have focused the conversation around responsible AI. And so I think that as far as the work that they've been doing is, I'll call it innovative, it's leading, and the Vermont AI team and the AI Council are actually the ones that are advising and advocating as other states are coming in and asking what the Vermont model is, which is nice. We are leading the way in this space. We can talk about the accomplishments if you want, but I think the note that's important is that Vermont started a multi-state AI network with 10 other states right now. I know that there's invitations for other states to join, but they are starting to look at AI governance and AI guardrails when it comes to government use of, but also engaging in the expectations of the vendor community as they roll out AI. If you look at how cloud, I love hearing that it's conversational now, but 10 years ago it was not. It was the world of the unknown, and I think AI is in that same space at the moment. And so we don't want to incur the same steps that we did through cloud adoption with AI. We want to be smart about it. This is a muscle memory that we have, and we need to use it to make better choices and responsible choices around the AI. And I think that's what the council's doing.
Go ahead.
You both put your hand up at the same time, so Representative.
Okay.
Yeah, just asking about the word network. So you said you have a network of states.
It's a working group.
Thank you.
Yes.
Question about, so similar, I guess, to the makeup of the Cyber Security Council, does the AI Council have legislative members on it? And if not, how does kind of work? Is there a liaison? Like, how is that working? Other than just like bill
I am
recommendations?
not a member of the council, so I don't know the answer, but I do think that it's important. Oh, I'm sorry. The co-chair of that council.
Yeah, we do have a legislative member who's acting in an outside, like in their outside capacity on the council. They are a social worker in their business life, and they were the representative of that sponsored the bill, so Representative Chena. Yeah, he's involved, but we have a pretty broad cross-section outside of government. We have members of the ACLU, we have different academic institutions that are heavily involved in the space. Law enforcement, human services, agriculture, correct, yeah.
And your co-chair.
And I'm co-chair along with Susanna Davis, our
I guess, so I guess so there's no appointed legislative members. And then I guess the second piece of mine was the communication. How is that happening? So aside from Representative Chena checking in as a personal project. Like, how does that formally happen?
I can answer that.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, so there is a YouTube channel for the AI Council, so they are broadcasting their meetings live, and they are also recording them for playback. They, Robert's rules, they're announcing when they held their meetings. They have a website on the digital services page, and so that's how they're driving a lot of their communication right now.
Just to add a tiny piece, we also have a series of reports that we are, through the statute, required to deliver to the legislature on certain dates. Yep.
So next up is the IT modernization dashboard. And this dashboard is also on the digital services site under the EPMO page, so the EMO page, where you can see where these IT modernization projects are in status and how they're going and how they're not. And I'm happy to answer questions. I know that there were two particular projects that were of interest, one on the unemployment insurance modernization and one on the ERP project. So I can speak to any questions that folks may have on that or other ones that are on the list that may be of interest.
I was wondering if you could speak to, I guess, broadly quality assurance and like how the process works on any of these projects from how the RFP is conducted, if an RFP is required, and then if there's like a third party that reviews RFPs, conducts risk assessments and kind of business rules outlines ahead of time, and then like does health checks like as you go, just for any kind of project.
So we are doing, there is a standard repeatable intake process that we're working through. We have a current ITABC is the form that everybody fills out, and that's what gets populated along the way. We follow the same procurement rules as any other state procurement that we go through. We are required to have an independent review prior to signing a contract. That is done by an independent third party that is built into the cost of the project. There are, based on how the project is written, checks and balances through the project lifecycle itself. And so those are also areas as we go into that operational maturity model, areas that we're looking to improve upon.
In particular, so one of the projects you mentioned, the ERP, when I was reviewing kind of the notes from this November of 2022, it mentioned Workday, and I was just curious, like, did an RFP process, formal RFP process, and did it go through the required steps, and was there an RFP, and I guess was the process fully followed for signing that original contract?
So obviously before my time.
Totally. Understood.
What I have documented along the way and the research that I've been doing on my own, the due diligence, we went through an RFP through the NASCO contract for the Workday licenses. And so that was what was vetted and conducted and completed a couple of years ago.
If I may, because that was under the secretary before the secretary before you. I was told by them that that was not a competitive bid per se, or no bid sort of situation. They selected the vendor and moved forward specifically on that train track without other bids coming in from other vendors. Is that accurate?
I can't speak to the process that NASCO went under around RFI for modern ERP systems that netted the opportunity to conduct an RFP for Workday. So I'm not.
If
You could go for it.
If
Mark knows, yes.
Yeah, I know painful. It's not in my stomach from anyone. Again, for the record, Mark Combs, I'm the Chief Technology Officer. So there were a series of RFIs and RFPs over the years. One, we were told that our current ERP system was going to be coming into place at some point. So we worked with an outside company to kind of give us an assessment of like, what should a future system look like? Not vendor, kind of vendor agnostic, and what kind of features should we move to? Because when you move to a cloud type environment, you don't get as much customization and things like that. So we worked with, I don't want to mention vendor names, but they came back with a recommendation for, you should be moving to a cloud-based ERP system. And it made sense to us because we'd had many years of costly, expensive upgrades on our current system, which is on-premise. Then we did some RFIs to identify some of the vendors in the space so that we could educate ourselves on who they were. And we got, sort of the big five in that space, I would call it. And then there was an RFP for just human capital management, which is the replacement for VTHR. As there's two sides of an ERP system, one being finance, another being human capital, both sides. So we went through the HCM side and we didn't finish scoring and, didn't issue a contract off of that, but Workday, as was mentioned, was the leading score off of that. We talked to our existing vendor and said, hey, do you have at the time a competing product to do a lift and shift for us so that we don't have to do a full-on re-implementation? They did not. They were on their, to this day, don't argue that fact that they did not at the time when we discussed it with them. So we went through then the lengthy process to build budget availability and gather requirements from different, cross agencies. And so by the time, we had went out for the licenses and subsequently the RFP for the implementation vendor, we kind of knew we were kind of basing the technology choice off of, several things. One was the RFP that had been done with the Department of Human Resources, as well as all the internal investigation we've done with different agencies like Gartner and look at who the leading vendors were in those spaces and talk to other peer states who were doing implementations around the same time and having successes. And that third piece was a huge important factor to us. So that all kind of led to us saying, okay, according to Bulletin 3.5, ADS can kind of have some weigh in on the technology, but we do have to bid out every dollar spent. So we did bid out the dollars for the license for, ERP licensing. We actually bid it out twice because the first time we only got one vendor returning with pricing, which we didn't think was sufficient. And then we settled on that pricing, and then we're now currently in the final phases of an RFP for an implementation vendor.
And to that pure state portion, one of the states that went through a similar process, I believe, has chosen to not continue with that project.
They're changing their implementation vendor.
Okay.
So I don't want to mention the state, but I think we're on the same page. And so because that was an alarm for us to look into, and what we learned essentially was that the product itself wasn't the problem, it was the implementation vendor. And so they switched their implementation vendor out, are choosing a new one, and they're going to re-engage the project on the same platform.
Okay.
There's another one I think that you're speaking about as well that did choose a separate platform on the other finance module.
Okay.
And they were under embargo and under NDA, so as far as the details to why, it was unknown, but the vendor that they chose in the finance side was one that they already had in place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was, okay. So yeah, one was a Midwestern. So the other New England state follows the story I just mentioned, and then there's a state in the Midwest that they chose to essentially go with an internal solution.
Okay. Please.
Yeah, I think a quick Google search it can show, and so I guess it's interesting listening to as point one state or two states when there's multiple states and college systems that have different degrees of halting contracts, changing implementation part, that's all public. So I guess in specific to Vermont, as far as the multiple kind of RFPs here, was there an RFP for a business review and process modification, and was that carried through?
So are you?
Sorry, I don't know which one to direct. Okay, sorry.
Business process management?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there is actually an active RFP right now in that space. So what I would share in a situation like this, I want to be clear on modernization. Technology is absolutely the fuel for a modernization project, but the modernization takes place in the form of business process and outcomes. That's what's modernizing. The technology itself absolutely does modernize, but it's not the end result and it's not a silo in itself. It has to adapt to the business process change that's happening. And so there is an active RFP, and that, again, when you go looking at the operational maturity that ADS has to undertake over the next 5 years, that is a critical component to it. That you can't, how do you measure success if you didn't identify the business process change, impact, and value that takes place?
I guess I'm curious about the order of the RFPs. Like I would think that the business rules and defining what you, working with an RFP, like a vendor, to come up with the business rules seems like it should come before signing a contract with a chosen software that you're going to be, and then having an implementation RFP. It seems a little bit, I just was wondering if you could explain the order of that.
Before my time.
I totally get it. Sure.
Right now.
Yeah.
We have not signed a contract with any implementation vendor. And when we sign that contract, it will be with that discovery component in place. And it will be with change management and consideration and the business process change.
Sure. Yeah, I guess just to clarify, so the order of the business rules before signing the vendor contract, not the implementation piece, which I understand makes sense to come last.
So
yeah.
in 2017, we did do a contract with a vendor to gather business requirements on the HCM and somewhat on the on the finance side of ERP. So we based a lot of our subsequent analysis and Q&A with the vendors upon those existing requirements. There's a different component to that than, there's your requirements, but then there's also the opportunity as you move to new cloud platforms to re-engineer a lot of your processes, follow new best practices. And so I think what the Secretary is mentioning is that in the contract that we have with this implementation vendor, they're going to be taking us through sort of, okay, let's look at what your requirements have been for the on-prem, the old system, and let's apply some new best practices for their broad breadth of experience and re-architect some of your business process.
Sorry. And I guess just thinking about questions of budget. So the budgets that were proposed originally and that we're kind of seeing, does that include what potentially could come out of if you're doing the business rules and scoping right now? So that at that point, you might not be sure that the original vendor is now going to be able to fit what you need it to. So thinking about budget, can we anticipate that you may need a bigger budget based on needing to have changes to meet what you actually need to implement?
I would say you can absolutely anticipate us asking. And it's not to meet requirements that were undiscovered. It would be more to meet a more holistic set of requirements that wasn't articulated at the first ask. When you look at this being a multi-year project, there are going to be things that weren't originally part of it that will now need to be part of it. And so we'll have to do our work on making sure that that's planned, managed, and scoped properly before we even come to ask for anything.
Oh my gosh, I think this might be it. Can you talk a little bit about, so you just mentioned the timeline, multi-year process. Can you talk a little bit about expectations and or changes in original expectations of timeline for both the HCM piece and then the financial piece?
What I can speak to, because it's still considered to be in RFP status, is that it will be a multi-year effort. We have to keep in mind that the current platforms that we're on in those spaces are both end of life. Mm-hmm. And that is cyber concern.
Yep.
It's a much broader concern that needs to be considered as part of this equation. Excellent. We're in the same position with the UI space, and I had an opportunity to update Lisa on our way up to this room that I did sign the IR. And so we're moving forward. The flood definitely posed a major impact, and the reason for that is we had 21 buildings in downtown Montpelier that were impacted, and our networking team managed through our chief technology officer. They had to make priority over keeping up on operations running, and we were able to slow that down a little bit. We are in the process of getting space allocated for that project team, and they will all be on site in the Montpelier area, and we're feeling good about it.
So on these two end-of-life platforms, where and how can we get the latest update on what's happening with it, replacing those?
As soon as we are in the point where the IR has been completed and there's a contract signed, I think that we can release the project information on replacement. But as far as the current cost of operations of the existing environment, that's going to have to be something that ADS and AOA work on together for you. It's a legacy system that is before ADS's time, so we don't have the IT funding that's going through right now.
These are the systems from the 70s, right? That aren't getting any.
90s, yeah.
Oh. Not the 70s. Oh.
That's 70.
Okay, great. It's better than I thought.
They were born in their future workforce now. So the thing that's really important for us right now, and something that the flood gave us a great opportunity to think differently about. So when I drive the conversation around user experience, what is the user experience that we want for our state employees, but also for Vermonters in doing business? So how do we keep service up and running and accessible no matter who you are, where you are, and in a secure way? So that gave our chief technology officer the opportunity to look at Build Back Better through the floods, but also take advantage of that through the network and security modernization effort. And so he's got a little timeline that I'm going to have him present back. But the theme behind this initiative is really about connecting state employees anytime, anywhere, securely. So,
Okay.
do you want to come a little closer? You have me there.
As long as I'm on camera and you guys can all hear me and see me effectively. Okay. Thank you for your time. Again, for the record, I'm Mark Combs. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Agency of Digital Services. So the networking group became mine as of the 1st of July. So 7 days later, the flood hit, and it was a great immersive learning opportunity for me.
Immersive.
Oh, that was actually not a pun, so yeah, thank you for catching that. One of the things that, so I'll describe kind of where we were at a very high level and not go through a lot of slideware, but if you think about the history of state government and state employees, you had a lot of buildings the building had belonged to an agency for a long period of time. The staff all worked within that building. They had data centers in that building. All their data lived there, right? The pandemic, the move to the public cloud, and things going on in sort of the broadband, capacity spaces have really shifted that whole dynamic to where, our network, which had really been protecting buildings and data within buildings, was really no longer serving an effective purpose for not only from the security perspective, but mainly from a user experience and from a performance perspective, because the assumption that everybody's working in 133 at DMV today is no longer true, right? They're working from home, or they're working from a hotel space up in National Life or wherever else they may be. So the flood was really sort of the opportunity to say, okay, guys, let's use this moment of accelerated involvement of everybody, and honestly, the funds which we were appropriated last year for network modernization could not have been more timely. Thank you very much. But we're looking at building a new network for the state that is really, it can protect our data no matter where it lives, whether it's in an internal data center or whether it's out in the cloud somewhere. whether the user accessing it is accessing it from home or accessing it from one of our hotel spaces nearest their house or their agency's main office. We want to have awareness and the ability to control those kinds of things. The other thing that's overlaying, and I think you heard it mentioned during the legislature's testimony, they're talking about having to go and rewire all of their buildings, right? We're not doing that. So when the flood hit the Montpelier State Office Complex, we had 23 buildings that were affected and out of commission from a networking perspective. And it would take months, if not years, to go jack by jack and check that every jack in that building was now working appropriately and that there wasn't like some wire somewhere that was rusted or exposed or whatever. So we've started implementing wireless networks. And I know we all had wireless networks in the past, but we're doing this in a much smarter fashion, right? We've got tools now that we're doing assessments of where people reside within buildings and what the network saturation is in those buildings. And we're placing things more optimally in those buildings. And we have the ability with the wireless to essentially, we saw this up at the Dill building during the SDOC, as an agency would move up there and say, hey, we're going to bring staff up here, but we need access to our DPS network, for example, from up here as if we're down at DPS. Because it was wireless, it was the push of a button. I could use software to define that network up in Dill. I didn't have that technicians come on site. It didn't take months. It took literally 3 seconds. And so that's the kind of build back better world that we're trying to achieve, where we're wireless first. The cost of going from where we are today, I'll throw out some nerdy term, Cat 5. Cat 5e has a bandwidth limit of one gigabit, right? I live in Northfield, pretty remote. I just got an offer for a fiber network to my house for 2 gigabits. I would actually have to upgrade the wires in my own home to take advantage of that. The state would have to upgrade its wires within the state. It's not worth the cost because then you're in a forever cycle of essentially doing some pretty heavy engineering work to cover that. Not to mention in the Montpelier office complex with the code changes around electrical and everything else, having to move a lot of gear now that had been in the basement up to the first and second floor is not just move the gear up. It's those buildings are going to have to be somewhat re-architected because you need load bearing concerns to be addressed. You need noise and other environmental concerns for employees and office spaces nearby to be concerned. So the wireless network is really a low impact from an industrial point of view way to kind of build back better.
So timing wise?
Timing wise, it was perfect, right?
But timing wise for the modernization project?
Yep. So where we are with the modernization project now is July, August were the flood, but building a plan. Right now we are designing from now until the end of the year, the actual what we're going to build, where we're going to build and how we're going to build. We'll do an RFP for an implementation vendor subsequent to that. But then the plan will essentially be to we'll do multiple phases of rollout. So because we have to hit, say, the Montpelier complex and then the Waterbury complex and then the Rutland complex, and we have to roll out wireless and we have to roll out other network equipment upgrades and update the circuits at those locations, as well as there's a statewide voice over IP phone system project that's going on as well. It doesn't make sense for us to hit all those buildings multiple times for these multiple efforts. So we're organizing it in a way where we're going to have 3 shifts over 18 months, 3 phases over 18 months, where one phase we've got one chunk of geo-located similarly area. We'll hit those and we'll kind of do the full stack of upgrades there. And then in the next phase, we'll do the next kind of geo close by facilities and get them done. the plan we have right now takes us out until the end of 2025.
Help me understand a little bit more about the breadth of this wireless effort.
Okay, so we have today, so the wireless network in the past, because we are an internal service fund, that SLA model we talked about, it was rolled out not from a very strategic, high-level point of view to give that as the best service across the state. It was each of the agencies or departments said, hey, we want wireless in our building. And they were essentially charged per device. And that ended up meaning that most of the buildings around the state are they're poorly covered as far as wireless. Their conference areas are often best covered, but the office areas and the break areas and those places are not very well covered. So we're hitting all of those buildings. We're doing an assessment and trying to provide a much stronger coverage across the site. We today have, we have 800 wireless access points. We probably need to finish this somewhere around 2,500 to 3,000 wireless access points across the state. The majority of those that we have deployed today were end of life 6 years ago.
And so if I can share kind of that experience side. So I know that 3,000 seems like a lot, but when we look at the way that the workforce exists today versus what they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people were on desktops sitting at their desk in their office, and that's how they conducted work. And in here, I see a lot of laptops, tablets, and mobile devices. Everybody is moving their work, and their work exists on their connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so the goal here is to create that connectivity access no matter where you are. So as we try to support this new workforce that exists and the new model of which the agencies are operating, this is accommodating that, is that it doesn't matter the office that you're in, it doesn't matter where you are, but we need to build that up.
Right.
So I guess maybe to be more specific about my question. So I'm curious about remote workforce. And I'm curious about that because we know wireless does not work for 100% of Vermont, particularly in the southern part of the state and the mountainous parts of the state where I live. Yeah. So that's what I'm worried about right in this moment.
Right.
So this is for state offices specifically, and so the wireless is what we create based on the wired connection.
It's buildings. It's not people.
It's buildings, it's not people, but it's access for the people because we built our castle in the old model where we threw everybody who wanted to come into state network, we threw them all coming into Montpelier. And we basically created a bottleneck, which is what our partners in judiciary experience is like, come on in, but you're all coming in through the same door and you know that there's going to be a stampede.
Yep.
There's been a stampede and we are now opening other doors and we're opening doors in different places so that people can still get what they want.
Oh, that is a very odd experience. You are shadowing yourself behind yourself. Thank you. That's nice.
Goes on forever.
Yes.
As we're hitting noon, how many additional topics did you want to touch on? Okay.
Questions. I just wonder, so as far as the IT project dashboard that we're like seeing, and this goes part into like the auditor's observations too, but like, I'm just curious, if it's even like possible, like, is there data, I guess, that's not on the dashboard that could be on the dashboard or that you're at least using for base for like, base funding, base schedule, changes in schedule, changes in budget, funding sources, whether or not that's like the appropriated pieces, which is hard because you don't have your own budget. So, but the appropriated pieces to the entity that you're like doing a thing for, and then what other funds might be being reappropriated to go to those projects, especially if they increase in like scope. Yeah, I guess that. All that, sorry. I just feel like there's a lot of missing
What I
data.
would share with you is we are already underway in a process to provide greater transparency and greater data sets. The auditor's report came at a really good time, and I think that there's a lot of points in there that do speak to what it is that we're working towards. So right now, the dashboard as it exists, we know can be better. We're going through and revising that intake process right now, working with the Chief Performance Office first and getting the business users pulled in, because there are those metrics and decision points that need to be captured early, but then they also need to be captured for management throughout the course of the project, and they should be able to be added into a dashboard. We're replacing our project management system as we speak as well. So there's a lot of moving parts going on at the moment that I think that my anticipation is by the end of the fiscal year, or even in the middle of the session, we'll start seeing launches of that information and data.
The other question is just around, like, so you've got on the project dashboard, there's a lot of projects that have, are being drafted or being approved or like have not yet actually started. And I was just curious, like, with the timelines on a lot of projects that are not, like, I guess a lot of projects that are not meeting the expected timelines, are any of that due to not just like funding, but employment vacancies? And then like for the vacancies piece, is that potentially going to impact like projects that you've got, like you're going to do them? Can you actually do them based on the staff that you have? And then how do you data-wise see those vacancies and are able to fill them to address the needs of the projects that you're getting money for?
So there is a balance between business vacancies and IT vacancies.
Sure.
It's both, from a resource management standpoint, are both risks across the board. We have a strong team that manages the day-to-day operations of the existing environments. And then we also are requesting those same folks be the ones to skill up in deploying and implementing. So we do work with a lot of partners on the implementation side, and we always have both project management and technology resources assigned in those projects. We are taking a deeper look at that around saturation and utilization of our staff to see where we can have room and where we don't have room. And we've definitely leveraged staff aug and contractors and partners in that space.
I hear you mentioned 21 buildings affected in the flood.
I thought it was 21, it was 23, sorry.
23, yeah.
23.
Just in Montpelier, yes.
Yes, so, and you mentioned we had built our castle in the model of Montpelier. I'm on the institutions committee. We haven't met yet to talk about where we're putting people for the foreseeable future. Have you gone forward on that? Or are you working in tandem with folks in institutions? Like where does that balance go as far as who directs where we go and then where the data?
Our COOP liaison reported under Mark's team during the flood, and Mark and his team have been working really close with BGS. So they built a co-supported process on standing up and where people are going when buildings were coming on board, and making sure that resources were available from the tech accessibility before people came into the office. And we also have folks coming on site as the offices are opening, so that if there's an issue that wasn't uncovered, that they have somebody there to help them.
I'd like to highlight like a really good story for you guys on that. So the tax department needed to move their check printing business out of 133. And we were able to move them up to Dewey and have them operational within a day and a half.
Yeah. Those were the successes of the floods that we haven't had a chance to talk about, so it's nice to share that. But working together has made all the difference.
Yeah.
Right.
We've asked Tim to come in at 12:30. So what I'd like to do is offer the committee and secretary a brief executive session if we need to touch on any cybersecurity issues. And then if it's all right with council, instead of reconvening, going live again and then adjourning, what I'd like to do is just after the executive session, go to lunch, if that's copacetic.
So it's 12:10.
Right. So what I was going to say is, suggesting is that we do a brief executive session now, break for lunch, come back for 12:30 for Tim.
Mr. Chair, does that, you mean break for lunch and bring our lunch back here?
Yeah, short, like Yes.
Like 10 minutes is what you're saying?
Yes.
As opposed to eating lunch separately and then coming back, which would eat up a fair amount of time.
I'll see if I can move my meeting.
Do you have an alternate schedule request?
I planned a meeting according to our agenda.
Okay.
I probably will be able to move it.
Okay. Secretary, would you like to do an executive session to review cybersecurity issues?
If you find it pertinent, I'm happy to say. I think given the questions and what we were able to discuss, I will leave that up to you.
Okay. Does anybody in the committee have additional questions they would like to ask about cybersecurity issues that would necessitate an executive session?
Sure. I would just wonder, have there been any cybersecurity incidents that you feel should be brought to our attention based on the effect or their seriousness or the possibility of being repeated?
I think that we have incidences come up. If I use the word frequent, infrequent, or often, that would be, an exaggeration. They happen. They occur. There's nothing in detail to share. What we're doing is looking at how do we harden that layer a little bit more? How do we protect our users more? And so we are going through those protocols right now in establishing tighter standards. Expect breach is a very safe model to use in a security office. That way that speaks to that zero trust approach. And so we employ that within our security office today.
Rep. Priestley has made the request.
Can we do it for both judiciary and ADS? If you're available.
How would that?
Maria?
Maria?
Do that.
You can. So first thing you want to do is have a committee discussion of what topics you want to cover and who you would like present.
Would it be appropriate to ask judiciary and ADS to stay or have?
For the same topic.
Switch seats? I'm okay with having them both stay. Let me ask, judiciary, is there anything that you would discuss in the cybersecurity discussion that you would not want ADS to hear? Okay.
Good point.
So then along those lines, is Kevin still?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, is Kevin?
Yeah.
So
I think that would be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. I didn't mean to leave you out. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Well, keep us together.
Secretary, is there anybody from your team that you would like to stay with you for this discussion?
I'm happy having them both stay. Both my chief of staff and my technology officer.
Okay. Yes, I agree. I'd like to have Lisa stay.
Yeah.
I like that Joe stay.
Joe.
Pretty much everybody's.
So
Mike and I stay. We can stay. We will have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if it's all right, Maria, I'd like you to stay. Mike, I'll leave it up to you if you.
I'm not going to be broadcasting, and I can close the Zoom and reopen it after.
What about Chittenden?
Senator
Chittenden.
Chittenden participating.
Senator Chittenden, are you still with us?
I'm able to do this.
So if there's concern about the Zoom meeting being secured, we can take the time, but there is time to do an end-to-end encryption meeting that's separate. And I'm happy to host that, but I'd have to send Senator Chittenden a new link. I'd have to send this room a new link. It takes a moment. And then we would verify those keys and then proceed.
Okay.
Just given the time it would take and our time pressure, would it be acceptable to Senator Chittenden if the chair and the vice chair briefed him on the result, on what happened during the executive session so that we can move along? Entirely up to Senator Chittenden.
Senator Brock, I had a 12 o'clock appointment, and so I have been out of commission for the last 15 minutes. My apologies, and I missed the discussion.
Question is, we're having an executive session with the leaders of the branches, the IT branches and their staff, to talk about cybersecurity issues and breaches. it's a complication to do it remotely via Zoom. And we would have to take down the Zoom link and set it back up as security. And my question was essentially, would it be acceptable to you if Representative Chase and I briefed you on the results of the executive session so that we don't have to do that?
Completely fine. And I apologize for the inconvenience of it being remote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything else required?
Nothing's required, so
Do
you
we
can
need to do a vote to
make
go?
a motion
Okay.
to go in.
We have a motion to go into executive session.
Yes.
State purpose.
Okay.
Just to clarify, to discuss sensitive matters related to cybersecurity. And the conversation discussion will be limited to only that subject.
Yes.
Right.
Is there a second?
Yes.
We'll say, yeah, either way.
Representative Chris.
Yeah, that's like.
All those,
2/3 majority in order for the motion to carry.
all those in favor?
Aye.